This is Jordan Peterson. If you're unfamiliar, he's a far-right nutcase. And Phil McGraw on the right, famous for having a TV show where he got drill sergeants in to scare the bejesus out of kids and convince them that what they were doing was wrong. FYI, if he were involved in the psychology... All right, let me put it this way. If he took the psychology experts seriously to any degree, if he took the literature seriously at all, he wouldn't have been doing scare tactics on his show, ever. Because scare tactics don't work, period. But that's neither here nor there. These two fine-looking gentlemen are here to discuss... What is it they're going to discuss? Let's see. Sexual identity is not who you are, and the obvious contagion effect of transgenderism. That's what they're going to discuss. I'm not even joking. So let's listen to what these people have to say. It's absolutely absurd from top to bottom, as I'm sure you know. I have a degree in psychology as well. Not as high as these guys, but I do have a degree. So let's see what they have to say. And while we do, we're going to play some Breath of the Wild 2, Tears of the Kingdom, just kind of running around doing whatever. So shouldn't bother you too much. All right, let's give this a listen.
The reason I'm asking you that question and presenting those possibilities is because the question of who you are, that's the question of identity, is begged by your first principle. You know, when people are saying now that...
You know, he's talking about first principle. So Dr. Phil wrote, let me rephrase, Phil wrote a book where he has 10 principles of life that everybody should follow, basically. Not dissimilar from Jordan Peterson's 12 rules of life or something to that effect. I can't find them outside of his stupid book, so, you know, I'm not buying his stupid book just to read those 10 principles. But anyway, yeah, let's keep listening with that in mind. I think they're referencing the principles there.
Of identity is begged by your first principle. You know, when people are saying now that they're their sexual identity, right? That's the biggest claim in our society. And that they...
No, I think people are saying their sexual identity is different from the one that you believe it to be. They're not saying that they are their sexual identity, but okay.
They should be proud of that claim. Sustainable. And then you can start doing that on purpose. Now, the reason I'm asking you that question and presenting those possibilities is because the question of who you are, that's the question of identity, is begged by your first principle. You know, when people are saying now that they're their sexual identity, right? That's the biggest claim in our society, and that they should be proud of that claim.
Well, I mean, people should be proud of who they are. Yes, absolutely. I want people to be proud of who they are. I want people to be happy with who they are and not feel like pieces of trash because you told them to. I want people to be who they are and be happy with it. Any psychologist would say that. Be happy with who you are. There are a couple of, you know, little errors here or there that need to be addressed, and we will address them. But you need to accept who you are and not be down on yourself 24/7. Now, what the hell are these guys saying? They are directly contradicting psychology by saying this stuff. Okay, go on.
To me, that just reduces who someone is to essentially to a very unidimensional biological drive that seeks immediate gratification.
Okay, well, that's incorrect, good sir. I simply disagree with you. Seems we're at an impasse. What do we do now? Look to the scientific literature, you think, maybe? Do you think that could help us get to, like, real factual information? If we looked at facts, this guy has no idea what he's talking about. None. And his followers don't realize that, seemingly. I'm talking Jordan Peterson. They don't seem to know that he's completely full of shit.
It's a very low order conception of who you are. So when you say be who you are on purpose, what do you think you're pointing to in that who you are?
I don't understand the question, but you know what? Okay, go on.
You know, I think it is a much harder question than people anticipate when they begin, which is why I say you've got to really sit down and think about this. Because when you ask somebody, tell me who you are, and you cannot use your occupation or what you spend most of your time doing in the answer. If I take that away from them, like if you're an accountant, that's what you do all day, 50, 60 hours a week. And I say, tell me who you are, and you can't use your occupation in the answer. It's astounding to me how people struggle because they identify themselves with labels. And, you know, I'm an accountant, or I'm a welder, or a welder's helper. And now, as you say, a lot of people have adopted a cause, and so they put that like they want to tattoo it on their forehead. That's not who they are.
And sometimes do.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, this is stupid.
Exactly. But that's not who they are. Who they are is multidimensional. It cuts across intrapersonal, interpersonal, spiritual, familial. It cuts across a lot of different levels.
Okay, here's the thing about Dr. Phil. I shouldn't even be calling him a doctor. He's not a practicing psychologist, to my knowledge, up to this moment. But either way, you know what? I suppose he got a doctorate degree, so whatever. Anyway, Phil, the thing about Phil is he's giving real, actual, legitimate psychology principles. The things that he says that are in line with psychology are on point. He's absolutely correct, yes. It would be really, really helpful and valuable to people to think about who they are. When they close their eyes at the end of the night and there's nobody there but them in the darkness, who are they? You know, we have something called an inner monologue, and the inner monologue is basically that voice that gives you information. Like, say I tell you, think of it, the name of a city, any city in the entire world, any. I'm going to give you 5 seconds. Think about it. What city did you think of? Did that city have anything to do with the state that you're in right now or the country that you're in right now? Why didn't you pick Cairo? You know that Cairo is a city. Why didn't you pick Cairo? It came to you almost unbidden, like you didn't request it. You didn't ask for it. It's just there. This concept came from Sam Harris, by the way. There's an inner monologue that we don't control. Similarly, a treatment for seizures used to be, or maybe still is, I'm not sure, severing the connection between your left brain and your right brain, basically sawing your brain in half. And people were fine. They come out of there and they're just fine. But now they, on occasion, have something called alien hand syndrome, where they'll be walking through a grocery store and, you know, be bopping along, getting their groceries or whatever, and next thing they know, Cinnamon Toast Crunch has been grabbed by their right hand and is sitting in their cart. Well, they don't remember grabbing Cinnamon Toast Crunch. It had nothing to do with that. What happened? They walk by the milk aisle and their right hand will just go nuts grabbing whatever it wants. It's because fundamentally the conscious brain is the CEO of the system. There are a lot of underlying processes that work between there and the CEO of the system, the conscious mind. We don't know, or let me rephrase, we know what choice we're going to make, even if we make a split-second decision. We know what choice we're going to make a whole 6 seconds before we make it on average. So the point is that the person doing the thinking is not you. You are not the one making the decisions. Cairo or, Portland or whatever city came to mind was not chosen by you. It was chosen by your unconscious mind. It made that choice. You just, it came to your mind. It was like it was spoken to you, like somebody got in your ear and whispered it to you. And you said, oh, all right, I'll pick that one. Why not? That is how the unconscious mind works. Now, back to what Phil was saying here.
Intrapersonal, interpersonal, spiritual, familial. It cuts across a lot of different levels, and I think it comes down to a real heavy. If you're doing a weighted equation,
Who are you? Who are you? He says you're a combination of, well, it cuts across a variety of different areas, familial and all kinds of other things. Who are you is not as simple an answer as people would think it is. That's the point that I'm trying to get to here. And people don't really know who they are unless they really give it some thought, unless they really evaluate their values and ideals and beliefs and feelings and everything. So anyway, I thought it was an interesting little rabbit hole to go down.
you have to give heavy weight to what they believe and what they're passionate about. And if in that description there's not something in there that they're really passionate about, I really say, wow, I would encourage you to seek that passion, because I think going through life without a passionate pursuit, man, that's got to look like 9 miles of bad road. I mean, you're just...
Yeah, you got to find something that keeps you going, that keeps you interested in life and everything. I agree. Got to keep something to keep the, or you got to do something to keep the old noggin jogging, if you will.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
just pushing a rock up a slippery hill. If you're not passionate, if you're passionate about something, then all of a sudden work becomes something that you want to do. It becomes something, it maybe your work and your vocation and your avocation can't be the same thing, but if you ever hit that, you've won the lottery if you love what you do enough.
Yeah, that's me. You've won the lottery, absolutely. If you love what you do enough to not hate it with every fiber of your being, that's me. I like what I do. I mean, it's a lot of work. I put a lot of time in. Oh my God, 100 hours sometimes. But I do love it to death.
That it's both your vocation and your avocation, and
Right. Well, I think that's the fortunate circumstance that you find yourself in when you align what could otherwise just be whim with a higher order calling. And I think the traditional...
What the hell does that, when you order whim with a higher order calling, what do you mean by that, Jordan? What the hell does that mean? It's completely nonsensical.
insistence, there's a traditional insistence that the Spirit of God is the divinity in calling, right? And you're pointing to
The
that.
Spirit of God is the divinity in calling. What? That doesn't make any sense.
You're using secular language and likely purposefully, but your notion is that there are things that will interest and compel you in your life, and your job is to, that's the call of the treasure that the dragon guards. That's a good way of thinking about it. And that if you pursue that, that infuses your life with a kind of sustaining meaning. When I wrote my first book, when I wrote Maps of Meaning, I wrote a chapter in that book called The Divinity of Interest, and it was really a paean to calling. And I knew it was incomplete, and so I want to run this by you because I think this is implicit in your principles too. You say, for example, don't reward bad behavior or support conduct you do not value. That's number 3. Do not stay silent just so others can remain comfortable. Actively live and support meritocracy. Those seem to
Actively live and support meritocracy. I'm not even sure what he means by that exactly.
me to be pointers to integrate conscience with calling, right? So imagine that there's 2 mechanisms that orient you towards your higher realization.
Okay, I'm imagining.
Let's put it that way. One would be the calling that infuses your life with significance and meaning, but it can go off track, right? It can become a delusional enthusiasm or a whim. You need another countervailing force that's something like conscience. And maybe that's the voice of integrated negative emotion, the warning voice. And so the calling says, go this way. And the conscience says, yeah, but stay on the path, right? Don't.
Well, that's the thing. That's an interesting thing about psychology, right? Like let's say you're trying to lose weight, right? And you make a deal with yourself. If I eat this cake today, then I will not have this thing tomorrow or whatever. Who are you making a deal with exactly? You're making a deal with you, with the other part of who you are. You are made up of multitudes. You're made up of multiple different pieces, multiple different beings, thinking beings simultaneously that have different tasks, that are good at different things. One is kind of an automated system that jumps into action the moment it's needed, and the other is kind of an analytical type of deal. There are a lot of different parts to a human being that make deals with each other and work together to accomplish a goal. They all have a common goal. And you, the conscious CEO, you are only getting the final result. You know, sometimes you're sitting here looking at cake, making a deal with yourself that goes like this. Well, I told myself that I wasn't going to eat this cake today because I had cake yesterday. But you know what? If I have cake today and yesterday, then I don't have to have cake for 2 days. And it just keeps going like that. Your automated systems are feeding you information and you are listening to them. You have no choice, practically. Very little choice to fight against them. And there has to be a will to fight against them. There has to be a system in there who's analytical and thinking and fighting against the automatic system that's trying to force you to eat that cake. Anyway, back to what we were saying here.
Don't be tempted by short-term callings. Stay on the path and keep yourself in check. And so that seems to me to be manifested, for example, in this. Let's look at number 6 just briefly. Do not stay silent just so others, you could say as well, do not stay silent just so others and yourself can remain comfortable. And you mean temporarily comfortable, I would presume, in that utterance as well.
Yes.
So the question that begs is, well, look, if I can stay silent and other people are comfortable.
He's using the question that begs incorrectly. Begging the question is a logical fallacy that has nothing to do with this situation, but whatever.
Why shouldn't I stay silent? And so let's walk into that. What's your sense of that?
I feel like Dr. Phil actually does remember some of his Psych 101 courses and is contributing some of his knowledge to his book or to the world from those Psych 101 classes. And Jordan Peterson is completely lost in the weeds, has no idea what's going on, and is in nothing but a coma, a talking point coma. Has no clue what to say other than woke bad.
Well, my sense of that is that you have a lot of people right now that are going to be uncomfortable if you call out some narratives that are being pushed on society that don't gel with your values, don't gel with your sense of factual base. And
you know what? If somebody called out what you call a narrative that doesn't gel with your sense of society or your logical base or whatever, I want to know if something is not quite right in society. I want to know. I want that information available to me. I want to understand if there's a real problem happening that needs to be dealt with. That's not what's happening. Trans people are a hated minority. They are not getting into the schools and brainwashing children or any of that other nonsense. These people have just eaten up that propaganda hook, line, and sinker, and will do whatever it takes to propagate that idea.
Science. And that's why if you look at number 4, measure all actions based on results and all thoughts based on rationality. And you're right. I'm describing these in secular terms on purpose, and people think, well, rationality is not a word I use every day, so how can I use that?
It's not. Rationality is not a word that I use every day. Really? Okay.
It's really very simple. Number one, is that thought based on verifiable fact?
There you go.
So if you have a thought, and we tend to believe ourselves, right? I mean, if I put
Oh, yeah, I believe I'm the most logical, principled, intelligent actor on planet Earth. And if people would just go with what I say and do, the world would be it would be 15 times better than it is right now. But everybody believes that about themselves. They all believe they're the most rational actor, the most intelligent, and they know what's best for society. You put Jordan Peterson in a position of authority, you put him in the White House, for example, and you let him do whatever it is he wants to do, he's going to believe that he's doing the right thing by and large. We all think we're rational actors. We all think we're operating off of factual information. That's why we have to have a gauge to determine who is more correct.
if you have a thought, and we tend to believe ourselves, right? I mean, if I put a blindfold on you and walk you around downtown or whatever, and you believe I've walked you to the edge of a 10-story building, and you believe that, we tend to believe ourselves, and that's what you're telling yourself. You're going to fight like trying to put a cat in a sack if I'm getting you to take the next
God, he's got the stupidest sayings. My God, bro.
step. You're like, whoa, no, I'm not going to do this because I've told myself this is going to be a doozy when I take this step. So if you're telling yourself that, you tend to believe yourself. Well, we've got to start getting people to verify their thoughts. I say that to people that are suicidal all the time. Test the rationality of your thoughts. Is what you're telling yourself this? Are you telling yourself you want to die, or are you telling yourself you want to stop the pain? Those are two very different things, and both of them have long-term consequences. So let's really test that out.
That's sound psychological analysis right there. Absolutely.
Second, does it protect and prolong your life? Does it get you what you want? I mean, there are just some very simple questions that you can ask yourself, and all of a sudden, if it fails any of those simple criteria, then you go, okay, I got to replace this with something that fits the criteria. Now, people aren't just kind of wandering around deciding, well, I trusted myself, but I didn't really know how to test my thinking. Well, I'm just giving them a very simple way to test their thinking. Number one being, is it verifiable fact, what you're telling yourself? And if it's not, you don't even go to number two. You've got to deal with facts and reality. And people that are rejecting science, saying biology just doesn't apply. We're going to decide that we're changing all that.
That's not happening. Biology doesn't apply or whatever. Let me tell you something about being trans. I know that's where he's going with this. I know that's the whole point here. In 99.9% of the cases, your biology and your gender identity are linked. 99% of the time, you are a man if you have like male reproductive parts, for example. But 1% of the time, you don't. They're not connected to each other. You have male reproductive parts and you have a female brain, effectively. Dr. Phil's certainly aware of that, right? Is he aware of that outlier? I mean, there are exceptions to every rule. The rule is your gender matches your sex. But there are exceptions to that. Does he, not realize that? Has he been through a psychology class before? Ever? Literally ever in his life? How did he get this far along with absolutely no clue about this subject? Everything that he said so far has actually been on point. He's been correct about all of it, basically. He's been right. Yes. All that stuff is accurate that he said. Why are you wrong about this? Have you not researched it enough? Do you not care? Are you lying? I don't know. I don't understand.
Saying biology just doesn't apply. We're going to decide that we're changing all that. There aren't men and women. We're going to change all that.
That's wrong. Nobody says that. Nobody says biology does not apply. That's fabricated garbage. That's garbitch, garbage. And I don't see how he doesn't see it for what it is.
And if it's not, you don't even go to number two. You've got to deal with facts and reality. And people that are rejecting science.
Nobody's rejecting science, Phil. Who? What people specifically? What are you talking about? Is there a group of people out there that's rejecting science? Which ones? What are they rejecting exactly? How many are there? It's completely fabricated nonsense. This isn't happening.
Saying biology just doesn't apply. We're going to decide
No one said that.
that we're changing all that. There aren't men and women. We're going to change all that. Well, I'm sorry. You don't get to just decide that. Yeah, I guess you
No one decided that. Nobody said that.
can decide that for yourself, but you're certainly not going to decide it for me. And if you're pushing that agenda, that's where you can't stay silent so others remain comfortable. You just can't let them run roughshod over you and everybody else with that agenda.
This isn't happening. This is just like, I don't know of okay, I am, pretty involved in left-wing circles. And I've literally never in my entire life ever heard of anybody who seemed to believe that biology, let me rephrase that, who seemed to think that sex and gender were not linked to each other at all in any way ever. If that's obviously not the case, who is telling you this? Who's feeding you this information? Have you interviewed people? Have you created control groups and groups of trans people and groups of cis people and gone through broken it all down and done the studies and all that? Have you done any of that? Or are you just completely talking out your ass right now? Do you have anything to back up what you've said so far? Or are you just completely full of shit? Because it sounds like you're full of shit right now. I'm looking for any reason to think you're not. Give me one.
Just so they don't get upset with you for saying, no, sorry, I'm not going to let you rewrite biology for me and my family, me and my life. I'm not going to let you pretend we didn't have slavery in our history just because you've decided that it's not good for kids to hear about that. Well,
is somebody doing that? What are you talking about?
I've decided it is good for kids to hear about that. I've decided they need to know that there were dark times in our history, and we can only learn from those dark times by acknowledging them. You can't change what you don't acknowledge. You've got to acknowledge this. So I think I'm trying to get people to start thinking, but if you give them some rules for thinking, they're going to be more efficient about it.
Okay, I'm just I'm lost. I have no clue what he's going on about right now, and it just makes no sense whatsoever. I'm trying, man. I am really trying.
In that answer, you integrated principle 3, 4, and 6. 3
I don't have a list of the principles. That'd be fantastic if you told me what they were.
Was don't reward bad behavior or support conduct you do not value. Do not stay silent just so others can remain comfortable. That's 6. And 4 was measure all actions based on results and thought on rationality. So if I understand you correctly,
why is he clicking the holy shit out of his pen right now? Why don't you just stop clicking the fucking pen? I'm sorry. Why don't you stop clicking the fucking pen already? Jesus.
Actions based on results and thought on rationality. So if I understand you correctly, one of the things you're pointing out is that you're called upon to make your opinion known. You're called upon to say something. You're called upon to differentially reward and punish based on the concordance of what you're hearing with what you know to be true.
Why doesn't he just use English? What the fuck does concordance mean? This guy is insufferable.
Rationally. And so the idea there would be that part of your conscience calls you to oppose opinions that are not aligned with the natural order of things, right? I mean, it's tricky, right? Because you hear all the time in the Enlightenment rationalist types, they say, follow the facts. And that's a weak argument because facts themselves don't specify a destination.
No, that's correct, I suppose.
On the other hand, there are opinions that fly in the face of what's real so egregiously that if you attend to them, you're going to walk into a pit. You're going to walk off a cliff.
What are you talking about exactly? He's saying that if you follow the facts, you're going to walk off of a pit, and that facts don't give you any useful information, or you can't follow them. What? I mean, this is the kind of garbage I'd expect to hear from a pseudo-Christian, pseudo-New Age nutcase.
And so if your principle number 6, the justification you had for that was that you shouldn't stay silent just so others can remain comfortable when you know that what is being said violates a reasonable understanding of the natural and social order. It's something like that. And so that indicates a belief in an order that's beyond the mere verbal, right? You know, like the Derrida in particular, I think it was Jacques Derrida in On Grammatology, he famously said there's nothing outside the text. Now, he walked that back to some degree when he was pushed on it, but I think it does get to something that's core in the postmodernist ethos, which is the idea that...
Why isn't he using English? Why does he keep saying postmodernist ethos and all of that other garbage? Just use English, please.
There's nothing to truth but the consensus of words, and that if you can change the consensus of words, you can change the truth. But the thing...
I don't know what that means, and it sounds wrong at its face. There's nothing to truth but the consensus of words? What could that possibly mean? What sense could I possibly make of that? It sounds like complete garbage.
Thing is that the verbal order has to reflect the intrinsic order of the cosmos, or it becomes delusional. Like a delusional verbal representation is internally consistent, right? And people can even develop a consensus around it, which is what a...
Right, and that's why you need to include facts. Yes, absolutely. So string theory is a great example of this. It's not delusion at all, but there's no evidence for string theory. It's not a theory. String theory is really string hypothesis. You can come up with all kinds of creative explanations and justifications and everything for why you are very confident that this is true, that this is the case. But it doesn't mean that it is. There can be internal consistency without it being real or true or accurate, without a doubt. That's why you have to include facts in the equation. That's why you have to have falsifiability in any hypothesis or in any theory. You must have falsifiability. You have to be able to prove it wrong and attempt to prove it wrong, but not be able to. It has to pass the falsifiability test. So that's what's different about I guess you'd say a hypothesis and an actual full-blown theory.
Fad is, or a social contagion. And so your hypothesis is something like conscience calls us to speak when the consensus has become delusional. It's something like that. Does that seem reasonable?
That is a reasonable interpretation. And you know from your clinical experience that how difficult it is to penetrate a well-structured, deeply entrenched delusional system. I mean, sometimes you can spend months and months and months trying to penetrate a individual's delusional system and think you're making all the headway in the world. I had a woman one time that I was working with that was convinced that she was being followed, monitored, and hearing voices from her walls, and I've spent all this time.
This sounds like schizophrenia. Delusions come with schizophrenia. Paranoid delusions, particularly. Commonly, not always. Sometimes they're grandiosity. Delusions of grandiosity. Like Kanye West has delusions of grandiosity, and I'm going to chalk that up to his mix of bipolar disorder and schizophrenia. Because delusions of grandiosity are a sign of bipolar disorder, not just like schizophrenia. So, anyway.
And felt like I really had made progress. And she said, yeah, you've convinced me. I'm 100%. You got me cured, Doc. I'm great. And on the way out, she said, I did, however, cut the wires to all the intercom system in the house because that's where I'm hearing the voices. So it's like, I'm with you, but on the other hand, I did strip all the intercom out of the house, and I thought, you know what? I'll take that partial victory. But you get into confirmation bias with people, and folks don't understand when you're dealing with people with confirmation bias. Research tells us if you
Confirmation bias being you see something happening and you find a way to fit it into your overarching view of the world, basically. So everything feeds into it. So you see a single Mexican walking down the road, and that feeds into your bias, your existing belief that, immigrants are everywhere, when that's just complete nonsense. Like, it's very possible, nay, likely, that there's just like a dude walking down the street and it's not a big deal. It doesn't feed into anything at all. Like, it's just, there's no overarching principle or no overarching issue taking place here, or whatever you want to call it. So, a guy walking down the street. That's confirmation bias.
You're dealing with people with confirmation bias. Research tells us if you bring them solid evidence to the contrary, they just dig in their heels.
That's true. That's why you need to use Socratic reasoning. It's called the backfire effect in psychology circles. The backfire effect happens when you give people evidence to disprove their existing beliefs. For example, there's a schizophrenic in the room with you, and the schizophrenic says to you, there's a guy in the back wearing a clown mask. You look back to see what he's talking about, and suddenly that's confirmation bias. You're looking at and acknowledging the figure that he saw. That's why when you're dealing with schizophrenics, you're never supposed to acknowledge or look at the figures that they report seeing in front of them. You're supposed to assume that they're not there, that they're not real, or for the sake of the schizophrenic person. Now, when you pass your hand through the person that they believe is there, it really freaks them out. They get completely lost. Like, they have no idea how to deal with what they just saw. It's mental delusion that you're dealing with here. And it's a serious issue. That's why when you're dealing with a schizophrenic person, you need to be very careful what you do, how you act, the things you say, all of it. You can't just go in completely uninformed and completely unknowledgeable about this subject.
You bring them solid evidence to the contrary, they just dig in their heels.
Right. So if you pass your hand through the person in the clown mask, they just dig in their heels and insist, no, it is real. It's real.
It gets worse, not better. Even if you show them scientific, objective, verifiable evidence to the contrary, they just dig in their heels more. So you got to deal with that first before you can get that new data to take hold.
Well, do you suppose that's maybe a reflection of something that you pointed to earlier? I mean, in the story of Exodus, the story of Exodus...
Wait, why are we bringing up the Bible? What does this have to do with anything?
This indicates that when people leave a tyranny, they enter a desert, right? They don't...
No, the story of Exodus is just a story. It doesn't indicate anything. When they exit tyranny, they enter a desert? What the hell does that even mean?
Don't leave the tyranny and go to the promised land. They leave a tyranny and they go to a desert. And maybe the problem with treating delusions with rational argumentation is that you break down the person's self-imposed interior tyranny, but you present them with the desert. So I wonder to what degree, maybe this is reflected in the fact, one of the most effective long-term cures.
I have no idea. He's giving an argument by analogy, and it is completely off the rails right now. It makes no sense at all. I have no clue what he's going on about.
For addictive behavior, especially alcoholism, appears to be religious transformation. And part of the reason for that, and AA capitalizes on that, but AA also provides people with a community that isn't focused on addictive behavior.
AA is valuable for that and that alone, that it's focused on a community that isn't focused on addictive behavior. But guess what? You can get that all kinds of places. I went to groups, secular groups that were not affiliated with AA, and none of them were focused on addictive behavior either. Very valuable to have a community like that. Absolutely. Now, I personally happen to think that, somebody who went to school for substance abuse counseling, psychology degree, I personally believe that that Alcoholics Anonymous is damaging and bad and should not be attended. We should not be going to AA or NA, Narcotics Anonymous, because ultimately they're trying to cram a religious message down your throat and replacing drugs with God at the end of the day. And guess what? Drugs and God fit into the same part of the brain as each other. So now what happens when your faith is challenged? You have nothing left. You've just built your entire personality on this thing because it was previously built upon drugs. What are you going to do when you realize it's all nonsensical? Or what are you going to do if you come to the determination that it's nonsensical, even if it's not? Even if God is real, what are you going to do when you realize that the AA group that you go to had a contradictory, nonsensical interpretation of the Bible? You're going to lose your reason for living. You're going to lose your reason for sobriety. It is important to base sobriety not on God, the way AA does, but on yourself, because you want it, because it's valuable to you.
I wonder if the solution to the supplantation of a delusion isn't deconstruction, isn't just poking holes in the delusion, but the simultaneous elaboration of a more comprehensive system of explanation that doesn't have the same flaws as the delusion. I mean, you kind of
what he's doing here is advocating for replacing drugs with God. We can't just replace drugs, or we can't just erase drugs, get rid of them. We have to replace them with something else. And that something else, in my opinion, just so happens to be God.
Intimated that when you said that it was immoral to do nothing but deconstruct, to do nothing but poke holes without providing a solution. So I don't know what you think about that clinically. And that hadn't occurred to me before with regard specifically to working with delusions.
Yeah, well, I've seen it in the real world in working with juries. I think one of the biggest myths is the burden of proof is on the prosecution.
Alexa, stop. Just a reminder to go to the DMV, sorry.
This is the burden of proof is on the prosecution.
The burden of proof is on the prosecution. Yes, that's accurate. The burden of proof is on the prosecution. What do you mean that's not accurate?
That's a myth. That may be written down in the rule books, but if you're really going to defend someone, you better present the jury with an alternative explanation.
Right.
Sure, yes. It's okay. So the prosecution will not present a case or not charge a case unless they have strong reason to believe that there was something going on that was of questionable activity. Let's say you rob a convenience store and your fingerprint's there, and the prosecutor brings a case against you because they have your fingerprint. And they checked that table the night before and it was wiped. They wiped the table down. They wiped the table down 20 minutes before the robbery happened, and now your fingerprint is on it. Put it that way. Well, you're innocent until proven guilty. But we happen to know for a fact that your fingerprint is on this table. So you're going to have to provide us an alternative explanation for why that is. So no, the court system still works in an innocent until proven guilty way. It's just you're going to have to explain these coincidences, quote unquote, that took place that led to the charge in the first place. That's all. Has nothing to do with innocent until proven guilty. This just shows me that Phil doesn't understand the first thing about the legal system.
better present the jury with an alternative explanation.
Right.
Just proving a negative is very hard to do to begin with. But they want to hear, if we're not down here for the reason we're told we're down here, then you better give me a alternative explanation of how this happened and why we're down here. And until you give them an alternative explanation, you're fighting an uphill battle for sure. And I think that's true with what you're saying about delusions. You need to give them an alternative existence outside that delusional system that's not a...
He's giving us another argument from from analogy, and it's nonsensical garbage. It doesn't mean anything at all. The argument from analogy that he's giving us here is just garbage. Like, why is he even going down this road? It means nothing. Just a joke, man. And tell me what you think about Jordan Peterson in the comments. He is shameless. He is a shameless liar, a scam artist, as far as I can tell. Like, give me a break.